The lighthouse keeper's secret. The salty air bit at my cheeks as I pulled my jacket tighter. The November whined a constant, whining companion on the rugged coast of Maine. I was 27 years old, and the solitude had become my refuge, my choice. City life had become nothing more than an echo, and I was working as an architect in some small New England town, escaping the shadows of a failed relationship. I needed the stark beauty of the coastline, the endless rhythm of the ocean's roar. It was like a balm on a wound that had stubbornly refused to heal. When I first saw the lighthouse of North Point, perched on the very edge of the world, its white tower a stark contrast against the gray, stormy skies, a strange sense of peace settled within me. It stood proud, almost defiant, against the elements. The town had a history of families who lived and breathed the lighthouse keeper's life, and one name echoed across the decades: the Montgomerys. The job opportunity was temporary, a way to earn some extra cash over the winter. The previous keeper, old Silas Montgomery, had been taken by illness during a sudden snowstorm, and I would be needed to tend the light until spring. The drive to the lighthouse felt like a journey into the past, the narrow road winding and twisting through thick pine forests and rocky outcrops. When I finally pulled up to the lighthouse, I was struck by how imposing it was. The old stone structure seemed to hum with the energy of 100 years of storms, its presence a promise of safety and solitude simultaneously. The cottage next to the tower, though small, was surprisingly cozy, filled with the scent of old wood and sea air. I ran my hand along the rough-hewn stone, a connection with the past pulling at me, and that's when I met her. She was there when I walked into the cozy cottage, Alara Montgomery, the niece of the deceased keeper. She stood there, framed by the soft glow of the fire, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders like a silken waterfall, and a smile that sent a jolt down my spine. I was speechless, stunned by the sheer force of her presence. Alara was unlike anyone I'd ever encountered, an ethereal beauty with a hint of wildness about her. She was in her mid-30s, a woman who held a depth that made me want to dive in and explore its every hidden corner. Alara told me she was there to ensure the lighthouse was passed over into safe hands, that she wasn't planning on staying. Yet, when I looked at her face, I could see the familiar love, her bond to the structure. The Montgomerys, they had a history, and Alara carried that history with her with a pride that could have lit the sky. She told me stories of her uncle Silas, a man who'd lived and loved with passion for the lighthouse and its history. I was mesmerized, drawn to her with an intensity I couldn't explain. It was as if she possessed the secret key to the sea, and I wanted her to show me her secrets. The next few weeks I found myself drawn more to the cottage than the architectural details. Alara, she wasn't just a keeper of the light, but a keeper of stories, of emotions I'd locked away. We'd spend hours talking, sharing our hopes, our fears, our dreams under the watchful eyes of the ever-burning flame. Her voice was a husky purr, and her laugh, when it came, was like the sweet melody of the ocean waves. There was an undercurrent of longing between us, a tension that hummed just beneath the surface. One evening, a storm rolled in, and the wind howled like a banshee. I found myself watching Alara as she tended to the lamp, her silhouette framed against the flickering light. She moved with a grace and purpose that was both mesmerizing and unsettling. There was a strength in her, a deep-seated connection to the elements that was both intoxicating and a little terrifying, and I had never felt so attracted to a woman in my life. It was like she was both the sea and the storm, beautiful, powerful, and dangerous. "The storm is going to get worse," she said, her gaze turning to me, holding a mixture of concern and something darker, something far more intimate. "The sea's restless tonight." I could feel my pulse quickening, the storm outside mirroring the tempest brewing within me. I wanted to be close to her, to explore the hidden depths of her heart, to understand the way she seemed so deeply intertwined with the lighthouse, with the wild, untamed forces of nature. "It's a powerful place," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, my eyes drinking in the way the firelight played on her face. "It feels alive." Ilara took a step closer, her eyes glittering with a raw, undisguised passion. It is alive, and so am I. The unspoken hung between us, thick and heavy, charged with a desire that was both terrifying and thrilling. She was a force of nature, and I was about to be caught in the undertow. As the wind rattled the windows, our conversation drifted toward the forbidden, the topics that we had not dared to cross until that moment. We shared stories about lost love, the aches of loneliness, and I could see her guarded expression melt away. I felt her pain, I shared mine, and the wall between us began to crumble. That night, I found myself unable to sleep. The storm raged on, and I tossed and turned, thoughts of Ilara and her smoldering eyes dancing in my head. I kept seeing her, standing in front of that powerful beam of light, and I found myself standing in the doorway of her room. It was only then that I fully admitted to myself the burning desire that was growing between us. It was her, the history of the lighthouse, the freedom of being lost in the middle of nowhere. Every single thing about her was pulling me, urging me to be bold, to break every rule I was taught and embrace the unknown. I had been fighting a battle that I was meant to lose. I stood on the threshold, and as I took a step, the door creaked, and she was there, silhouetted by the dying embers, her eyes searching for an answer. "I can't sleep," I said, and my voice was raw and honest. "I can't stay away." Ilara closed the distance, and her touch was like electricity, igniting every nerve in my body. "I know," she breathed, her lips brushing against mine, a gentle promise of more to come. Our kiss was a slow burn, a delicate dance of mouths and tongues, a silent acknowledgement of the passion that had been simmering beneath the surface. She ran her fingers through my hair, her touch sending shivers down my spine, and I responded with a hunger that had been a constant companion. It was more than just physical. This was a coming together of souls, a recognition of a connection that had defied time and distance. The night unfolded in a way I couldn't have imagined. Every touch, every kiss was an exploration of the depths of our desires and longings. I felt as if I had been brought to the brink and was now ready to jump into the abyss. I'd never experienced this raw, visceral hunger before, and I let it consume me, let it be the map to where I needed to be. I saw more than the lighthouse then. I saw her. She was the ocean. She was the lighthouse. She was everything the world was built from. I was lost in her. As dawn finally broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, we lay in each other's arms, our bodies intertwined. The storm had subsided, but a different kind of tempest had been unleashed within us, a feeling I had a hard time putting into words. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice soft and low, my fingers tracing the lines of her face.
Ilara looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of tenderness and uncertainty. "We do what we were meant to do. We follow this wherever it leads us," she said. In the days that followed, we explored our feelings with an honesty that was both terrifying and liberating. We learned about each other, about our fears and desires, under the watchful eye of the ever-burning light. The lighthouse became our sanctuary, a place where time seemed to stand still, a world where our connection was the only thing that truly mattered. We took walks on the beach, the sand cold beneath our feet. The wind was a constant companion, and Ilara's dark hair would dance around her face as we kissed. We would find secret corners in the lighthouse tower and lose ourselves in each other. We were two souls recognizing a path laid for us centuries ago. The days bled into weeks, and with every stolen kiss, with every shared glance, our bond deepened. I found myself falling for her with a ferocity I hadn't known existed. It wasn't just lust or passion. It was a deep, all-consuming love that felt like it had always been there, waiting to be ignited. I was lost in the labyrinth of her love, and wanted nothing more than to surrender to her. One clear evening, we were on the balcony, overlooking the endless expanse of the ocean, the stars twinkling like diamonds scattered on a velvet cloth. "I want you to know that this isn't just a fling for me," Ilara said, her voice serious, her hand finding mine. What we share. The confession was a lightning bolt, a searing acknowledgement of what I had been feeling all along. I looked at her, my heart pounding. "I know," I replied, my fingers tightening around hers. "I never expected this, but I can't imagine." We spent the rest of the night wrapped in each other's arms, our bodies so close that it felt like we were one being, our every touch a spark to a fire that raged. I would run my hand down her side, memorizing the feel of her skin, and she would respond with a heat that I would breath her in, and the scent of her, a mix of salt and spices, was Alara was more than just a woman to me. She was a storm, a beacon, a whisper in the dark, and I knew I would follow her to. And as the days ticked down towards spring, we both felt a pull. But it was no longer the magnetic pull of the lighthouse. One gray winter afternoon, we were working on the lamp when Alara turned to me, her eyes filled with a longing that mirrored my own. It's not. Her question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fears, and the prospect of leaving the lighthouse suddenly felt like a pain. "No," I replied, my voice firm despite the turmoil within me. "This isn't ending, not if." She stepped closer, the firelight dancing in her eyes, and the storm that had raged outside was now a smoldering fire in her soul that I could feel reaching for mine. "Then we're going to do whatever we want," I said, my voice low and raw, my gaze. And it was in that moment, with the storm raging outside and our souls on fire, that we made the decision to let go of fear and to follow our hearts wherever. The decision was a leap, a plunge into a depth that was vast, wild, and beautiful all the same. I knew that whatever was waiting ahead of us, it was a path that I would. Our shared experiences created a foundation for something beautiful. And despite the difference in our ages and lives, we had found that love could transcend any barrier and that we were meant. We continued our days at the lighthouse, but our nights were a symphony of desires and passions. I was lost in the labyrinth of her body, in the softness of her skin, in the. I could not have known love could feel like this, both gentle and yet complete. But our time at the lighthouse was ticking to an end, and when the spring came, I found myself. One morning, the sun rose, painting the sky in vibrant hues of pink and orange. I stood on the balcony, watching the waves crash against the rocks below, and Alara joined me, her hand. It was time. The weather was getting warmer, and I knew this was the last day before the town would send someone else to relieve me. "What are we going to do now?" she asked, her voice. I looked at her, the answer already etched on my soul. "We're going to go, together. We're going to keep the fire we built burning." Ilara smiled, her eyes sparkling like the sea, and she reached to touch my cheek, pulling me to her for one last tender kiss in the morning light. "You are right. Let's do it." We packed our lives into boxes, and when we finally left, it was together, not as a keeper and a temporary help, but as two souls who had found a love that had defied all logic, all boundaries. As we drove away, the lighthouse receded in the distance, its white tower a beacon on the horizon, and our gaze never left it, or each other. It stood as a testament to our love, to a connection that was forged in the heart of a storm, and would weather any challenge, any distance, any time. It was a reminder of what can be built from a fire that's hot enough to burn away every wall that exists. Our journey had only just begun. It would be filled with its own set of challenges and rewards, but as I looked at her, my partner, my lover, I knew that we were ready, that we would be facing it all together. We would make our own magic, our own lighthouse, and we would illuminate each other's hearts for as long as we both drew breath. "Where are we going?" Alara asked, her voice soft, our fingers interlaced. "Wherever our hearts lead us," I replied. "Together." We drove on, and the path, for us, was now open, and the only thing that mattered was the love we shared and the journey we were about to take.